Replace it with my Raspberry Pi. Okay. Check, 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 check. We've got 5 minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and go. Thank you for coming to AIDE. We like to thank our sponsors, Liticode, Jackson Kelly, and a lot more. Go out to appyide.org to check out the sponsors, and I guess you'll also have them on the first screen, Adrian? Okay, so thank you for our sponsors. Thank you to everyone who has attended. This is the last talk in the information security track of the day. So what I'm going to talk about today is something that bothers me. This is a rant. I've given this talk a couple times before, and never get through it before there's a outburst in the room. I think I did get through it at HackerCon, but this is something that people don't agree with me on, and that's fine. There's room for disagreement. There is not room in our community for backstabbing, just the public disagreements that happen probably are being done under trolling, but there's some real nasty disagreements that take place in our community. Also, I know of no other profession that goes on social media and whines about stuff constantly. Everything. Whines about everything. So, disclaimer, even though I teach at Marshall, this talk does not represent the official opinions of Marshall University. It's my own opinion, so anything that I say today that's stupid, it's on my own accord. So what is a profession? Well, according to Google, profession is a paid occupation, especially one that involves prolonged training and formal qualification. So we all sort of come from, a lot of in this room came from a hacker background where we basically followed around a bunch of other hackers until we figured out what we were doing, and then we were hackers, right? Although some people say that I'm still not a hacker, but that's cool. We can have that discussion too. So we're talking about the difference between education and training. What I'm going to focus on today is education. So training is what we got through this apprenticeship, this sort of informal apprenticeship of hanging out on IRC, reading man pages, reading documentation, right? It's a self-education, it's training, but it is not education in the purest form. As Dave Kennedy says, we're a young industry, and this is straight from one of Dave's slides. Sorry, Dave. I guess if I give the source of the information, it's not plagiarism. I don't want to be accused of plagiarism. So if you look at first DEF CON's 1993, that's really not that long ago in the big scheme of things. I think there have probably been other professions around, like doctors and lawyers, for a little bit longer than that. So we sort of get a pass in some ways, I guess. But breaches get bigger every year. This is a growing industry because we've not figured out how to stop breaches. Every breach is the biggest one in history. That's a problem. So we suck as an industry. So we need to find a way forward. Attribution bingo. Attribution's hard, and we really shouldn't be using crappy attribution to make foreign policy, and unfortunately that's what's happened for the last few years. So education is a lifelong process, and education usually means formal learning. So for example, if you come to college, you're supposed to leave being a well-rounded person. You spend 2 years studying how to write, how to publicly speak. You don't get that in training. Training is very focused on your vocation. So that's one of the differences between education and training. A lot of people question the value of a college degree. I have degrees in political science and journalism. And I know Adrian says that, you should get a STEM degree or you're not going to make any money. And quite frankly, I would not trade my liberal arts education for anything in the world. But, I became a hacker through training, not education. but yet without that educational background, I could have not have gotten into whatever I wanted to do. So in the 19th century, you became a lawyer by apprenticing with another lawyer, right? You followed a lawyer around till you knew what you were doing, and boom, you're a lawyer. That's sort of how hackers have been made up to this point. Johnny Cochran has a law degree. When you go to your lawyer, or if you retain a lawyer, I almost said detain a lawyer, but that's a whole other story. If you go to a lawyer and you need their professional services, you're going to probably go on their website, see where they went to law school. You're going to make sure they're the member of the bar in which you have a case. You're going to see how many other places they're a member of the bar. You're going to look at the representative cases. You're going to make sure that they are professionals, right? We don't really have that in InfoSec. We have training. We have training like we have these talks. We have offensive security training. I am an OSCP, for example. Black hat training. But training and education are different. Once again, beating that dead horse. So we're changing industry. InfoSec is a changing industry. Cybersecurity, if you want to call it that. Drink. Is a changing industry. And for those of people who became, system administrators, who became security consultants, how we got to where we are today is different than my students, for example. They're going to get degrees in digital forensics and information assurance. They're going to go into a field as a digital forensics and information assurance professional. That's something that we did not get to do. So what's making our profession more professional? One is having a framework. In penetration testing, I think the PTES is an excellent framework. And thanks to Ian and Dave and Chris Nickerson and everyone who did the work. If you go to the PTES website, it very clearly tells you what pre-engagement activities are. This is not just for people performing penetration tests. It's also for people who buy penetration tests. Thanks to Trusted Sec also for being a sponsor. So here's another shout out for Dave and his sponsor in our sponsorship. So this is how this works, right? You have a beginning point, pre-engagement. You have intelligence gathering. You have steps that you follow as a professional. And if you're not following these steps, there's some question about if you're a professional or not. These are community adopted standards. They're not adopted by everybody, but it holds us to a standard. Believe me, there's a lot of unprofessional penetration testers out there. You can go on Fiverr and hire somebody to test your website. I'm not sure I'd like to have a penetration test from somebody on Fiverr. Or Craigslist or any place else that I could hire someone off the web to break into my website. So we use the CISSP in our community. I don't know that the CISSP is the best thing in the world, but it's better than nothing. And I don't have a CISSP. There are people in the room who do. It's a way of saying you have two CISSPs. So you have one in healthcare as well as the other one. Okay. Now I forgot what I was talking about. So it's better than nothing in that it gives you sort of a benchmark of, hey, I have this amount of knowledge in this field, so therefore I'm a professional. It's better than nothing. Kevin Johnson's actually said that what we need to do is a bar association for security professionals, where your peers test you in some way or come up with a way, and that's basically what the CISSP is, but he says it needs to be deeper, and I think that he's on the right track. So, well, there's a lot, there's been a lot of new people, new blood on the ISC squared board, and I think they're trying to do better. One of the issues I have is my students come to me and they're like, I want to be a CISSP, and I'm like, you can't even set for the test because you don't have the prerequisite experience to set for the test. I hold the Security Plus. I'm not a big fan of the Security Plus. I'm even less of a fan of CEH. Please, EC Council, don't sue me. But those tests are about taking a test. It's not about actually having knowledge. And unfortunately, a lot of those test questions are so dated that you really have to learn the wrong answer in order to pass them. So accrediting professionals. Step 1 is education. Step 2 is training. Hands-on training. You both have to be able to talk to middle management, write well, speak well, understand world history, if nothing else, to be more interesting at cocktail parties. And you also have to have training, hands-on training. You know, there are some cybersecurity programs out there where you don't get hands-on. You talk about things that you need to know, but you don't actually do them. You don't actually break into a computer. You don't actually do forensics. You talk about it. You take tests on it, but that is not being a well-rounded education. And also, you have to take steps for lifelong learning. And CISSP sets you up for that mainly because you have to do continuing education credits. If you're a lawyer, you have to do CPE, continuing legal education credits. If you're a doctor, you have to do continuing education credits. And we, as a profession, needs to do continuing education. And we're lucky enough to have these community-driven conferences where you can get some of that as well. So lifelong learning, that's also on top of your formal education. So it's a blended approach. I just stated all that. If you want to read that slide, you can. We have a culture we have a culture that is divided. We have the suits versus the hoodies. I'm the bow tie. So I originally taught the first 2 or 3 years I taught here in black t-shirt because I wanted to be hackerish, right? You want to be a hacker, you dress like a hacker. I've kind of put that behind me because if I wear a bow tie, people tend to take me a little bit more seriously. And we have a stake here in our program. We'd like to see it move forward, so I started wearing bow ties. In the community, you've got the cyber, oh my God, cyber people. And then you've got you jackasses who sit around on Facebook and Twitter and talk shit about the cyber, oh my God, cyber people. Really? ASL, age, sex, location. We need to figure out how to come together as a community. This is the reason we're getting our ass kicked by attackers. We need to have a peace treaty between the hoodies and the suits. And yes, the suits need to stop, come to reality and understand what they're talking about. But we also, the hoodies, need to stop being 14-year-old boys on social media. And sorry, Adrian. We also need to quit cannibalizing our community. You forensic science folks, do you all get on Twitter and argue about DNA technology? Oh, come on. No, but in our community, we have constant controversy that goes on forever about the dumbest things until people get their feelings hurt. And we need to stop cannibalizing our own community. And I could sit here and give you a list of people who do this. No, thank you. So just stop, okay? Think about what you say. It's the same talk you give to grades, you gotta give to high schoolers. Don't put on social media anything you wouldn't say to someone else's face. And we are not good about that in information security. Cyber warfare is a thing. Cyber ninja, not so much. We can't continue to cyber every word. My favorite new word is cyber hack. The Russian cyber hack. I think ABC News was the first one to use it. Every time I hear it, I almost crash my car. We need to call things what they are. This word cyber is some form of magical unicorns. And everything can't be cyber. You know, I once talked to a C-level executive who, you know, was like, yeah, you know, I thought about the other day and everything is cyber. The telephone poles, the telephone wires, everything is not freaking cyber. And, you know, John Sammons and I have this conversation. I'm like, it's information security. We are not protecting our cybers. We're protecting our information. The word needs to die, but unfortunately it never will. So if we can't kill the word, let's at least use it appropriately. Sorry, that's my journalism background. Stop the drama. Quit being drama llamas. And I'm not trying to point out anyone specifically. There's a lot of drama going both ways. Stop the drama. Stop cussing on Twitter. You cannot cuss as a professional and be taken seriously. Well, yes and no. I'm not really talking about you, and I'm not really talking about anyone in this room. I'm talking about people who go on Twitter and go on these tirades. What were you saying, Adrian? I'm sorry. If you're a porn star, you can use foul language because that's part of your profession. Communication is the key. We need to communicate better. I'm glad that I got through this talk without being stopped by somebody in the back of the room wanting to argue with me. DerbyCon was not a fun time. B-Sides Charleston. Was it B-Sides Charleston the other time? I don't know if I gave that one there or not. Anyway, it's not a fun time whenever I give this talk because most people are like, you're full of BS. There are people who are old school who don't think they need a degree to do what we do. In the future, you're going to need a degree to do what we do because you're going to have some sort of professional baseline. The CISSP is pretty good, but you have to have experience to get it. It's the same. Do people become doctors without degrees? Do people become, I guess if you watch Catch Me If You Can be anything without a degree. But we're going to have some sort of concrete benchmarks to meet in order to say that you're an information security professional. Does anyone disagree? I'm getting Socratic. Yes, you in the black shirt. Okay. So do you think your doctor should have a degree? Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree with you. But can you be a professional without having some sort of professional accreditation? Does the CISSP do that? Yeah. But when our industry gets so big, we're not going to know each other by our capabilities because there's going to be so many of us that we won't know each other. Yes, John. Yeah, I agree with you. Right, the certification or the skill. And I think the skill will always be more important. Yeah. Yeah. Right. 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 And I don't know. I mean, I think if we're going to be a profession, we have to have some sort of professional credentialing. That's the first step. Do you need a degree? There are those who say you don't need a degree to do much of anything. You don't need a. You need a degree to be a police officer? I think you have to have one. You have to have a high school degree now to join the Army. So we have to figure out what the standards are and set them. To me, I think a college degree is important because I have two of them. And I teach in higher education. But, you know, there's many different ways of getting there. But I think 100 years down the road, to do what we do is going to be a profession. And we need to plan for how we do that as a community. Yes? Right. Right. Mm-hmm. You're going to be behind. Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah, people without degrees will be behind the curve in some way. I'm going to take this way down the rabbit hole. Mark Rogers, who's speaking over in the digital forensics part, once said, let's compare education versus training as the following. Would you rather have your child have sex education or sex training? I mean, if you really want to learn it, you want the training, right? But shouldn't you have the education before you have the training? I'm not even going down there, but you understand the point I'm trying to make. Oh yeah, well, I'm unlearning. Yep. Right. Right. They have an artifact, to use the higher education word. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are people with postgraduate degrees and working at McDonald's. So I think the point, right, and also I think a blended approach is necessary where, you know, in the case of education and, you know, I came to education from industry, so I'm going to be different than somebody who has a PhD in curriculum development. So I try to spend a lot of time at the Center for Teaching and Learning because they know things that I don't. But being blended means that you're mixing it up so that your students are getting the best of all worlds. And yes, you can do self-study. I'm teaching, there's at least one student in here in my online network penetration and attack class. Do you think that it's easy? Yeah? Yeah, it's easy. But it's self-directed, right? So it's self-directed. Some people thrive, some people don't. So blended approach is the way that we go. I think in our industry, we're all about the spectacle. DEF CON is about the spectacle. Let's drop O-days on stage and light ourselves on fire and, you know, what else? Let's rappel from the hotel. I mean, you know, part of being a, huh? Yeah, whine about Hacker Jeopardy. But by making yourself a spectacle, you don't go to a medical conference where people are repelling from the hotel. And I guess being a part of being in this community is being a bad boy or being, the weird one. But, we also have to eat and we have jobs. So I always say that hackers are like motorcycle clubs. You've got the ones that go out and they raise money for sick kids, and then you got the ones that are, dealing drugs and selling arms. And that's very true in our community too. I don't know that. I don't have any of the answers. I'm posing the questions. If you have an answer, I think that's great. I think it's something we need to talk about moving forward. Yes, sir. Okay. Right. 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 Nope. And some people aren't good at directed learning. Yeah, you're right. And there's room for both. I guess my question goes back, and the point of this talk is that we need to think about how we look to other people to be taken seriously in the C-level suite. Part of that's personal responsibility, but I think it's also responsibility as a community. Benjamin Stark, do you have a question? Okay. Doesn't he look like Benjamin Stark? His illegitimate son. Yes, Mr. Korn. No. I think it has already started to. Like, we don't have spot the Fed at DEF CON anymore. Huh? A hoodie. I know there's a lot of suits going to DEF CON, and we don't play spot the Fed. Keith Alexander was a keynote at DEF CON one year, right before the Snowden thing hit, which was kind of weird timing. But do you think that they'll ever blend? I think that we could communicate. We could communicate better, but a lot of this is wishful thinking. This is like a talk where I come up here and say, we need world peace. Why can't the Israelis and the Palestinians just get along? In the end, we may not find an end to this conflict. But as a community, we tear ourselves apart because of these conflicts. And I think that we're better than that. Yes, John. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's a lot different. Perception. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. No, it's not going to fly. Right. Well, I mean, there are cultural differences. Even if you look East Coast versus West Coast, who's ever worked in a startup? So the Intuit people came to town because Brad Smith is a graduate of Marshall University and They're designed for delight for students, and basically what they're doing is trying to use their design for delight framework, which they use for new products and new initiatives inside their company, to try to fix some of the problems in West Virginia. And how were they all dressed when they showed up here? Well, I'm wearing this, and I was way overdressed to interact with these people, because they were wearing what they wore to work in California, which was way less dressy than what I wear even to teach. So, I mean, culture is going to be different. I just think that we need to not let cultural differences in the community separate us. Just because somebody's wearing a black t-shirt doesn't mean they're a bad person. And just because somebody wears a suit and works in cybersecurity doesn't mean they're a dumbass. There's some middle ground there somewhere. I mean, you've got the hacker conference. Oh, those guys, the cyber, don't know what they're doing. And then, you've got people who work in the corporate side or even educational side look at the black shirted, mohawked, kilt wearing thugs and wonder what the hell's going on here. Brian Martin's now walking on my talk. I pissed him off. Have a safe drive. And thanks for coming. Come back next time. You can fly next time. So anyone else? Amanda, do you have anything to say on this? I don't have a degree in cybersecurity. Yet I feel that my education helped me get to where I am. I have to have a master's degree to teach at university, right? So it's in journalism. I don't know. I'm afraid I'm going to run off the rails and start talking about stuff I shouldn't be talking about, but that is the next slide. I'm done. No, I'm done. Yeah, I just went back to the blended approach. This is not a very long talk. The biggest part of this talk is opening up a dialogue. When we talk about becoming a more professional profession, I'm not really talking about us. I'm talking about the next generation. If your kids decided to go into information security, how would they what's their career path? You know what I'm saying? They're likely to go to a university, they're likely to get a degree, and they're likely going to have to pass some sort of test that says, hey, I'm an information security professional. I don't know that they're going to hang out on 4chan, or goodness gracious, why do you want to? You can only look at so many tortured dogs in a week, huh? For the lulz. Well, I mean, that's part of it too. I'm saying the next generation, what is it going to look like? It's going to be different than what we saw, hanging on IRC channels while people still do it. It's in the future, it's going to be an unlikely path. Well, I mean, okay, let's look at Slack. I hate Slack. If I get invited to one more Slack channel, I'm going to go ballistic. Let's look at doctors. Doctors used to hang around graveyards so that they could pilfer the graves so they could look at bones, right? They don't do that anymore. Why? Because they're professionals. Does my analogies work? Barbers used to be doctors. So they used to bleed people and put leeches on them. And they either got better or they died. And the way you became a doctor is you followed around another doctor and bled people and put leeches on them until they got better or they died. We're at the phase in information security that we're going around bleeding people and putting leeches on them and seeing if they survive or die. This community will change. The technologies change. I think AI is going to play a big part of this as we move forward. And it's going to be a different world. We need to think about what the world looks like when we get there. That's all I have. Thank you for coming to the conference. I know it's a short talk and rant. Yes? You're just going to ask questions to keep me up here. What? Go ahead. I'm serious. Go ahead. I took it out. Yes. Don't leave your computer unlocked about Amanda. You'll get special slides put into your decks.
Was it this one?
No, it was the other one. No. No. Anyway, I'm done. You all can get out of here. Are we still recording?